Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode here on European Confessions. So I had this conversation with our dear brother who is living there in Europe, and we spoke for a very long time, and he told me his own story. The message that he sent to me, it reads like this. Hello, Brother Nashi, how are you? Can you please post my own story as hidden identity? I have come here on your platform so that I can confess. My story, it started when I wanted to seek spiritual enlightenment. I started to watch a lot of shows here on YouTube. Most of these shows, they are done by people who are from my own country and traditional healers and people like that. So I was really interested and I wanted to reconnect with my own ancestors. So what had happened in our family was that anyone who would have died, we will ignore that person. There were a lot of graves, including my father's grave, that didn't have a tombstone. We had just moved on with our lives. So as someone who was like the breadwinner in the family, I then started to speak with my relatives, and I then told my relatives that this is what I wished to be done whilst we were still alive. I wanted us to honor our relatives that had passed away, including our grandfather, our grandmother, and all of my relatives. They agreed, but they said that the problem is that no one had the money. Indeed, they wanted these tombstones to be laid on the graves of our relatives, but there was no one who had money at all. As for my relatives, the ones that are working in South Africa, I said, if you are able to find your way back to Zim, when we are going to be having this family reunion, then I am willing to pay for each and every item that is going to be needed for this great ceremony. Let us do this, because I was seeking spiritual enlightenment and I wanted to reconnect with the past. And all of my relatives, they agreed. So me and my wife, we then traveled from UK and we returned back to Zim. And when we returned back to Zim, we went straight to the villages. And whilst we were at our grandfather's compound, when we were busy doing all the rituals that were supposed to be done, I then saw that I was the one who was always being put in front. Anything that was supposed to be done like in the traditional way, I was the one who was always put in front. Yet I was very young. I thought that since I was young, I was not supposed to be at the front, because my aunties were there as well as my other elder cousin brothers, but they kept on hiding behind my back. Whenever there was a ritual that was supposed to be performed, I was the one who was placed in front. When it came time for us to communicate with our ancestors, I was the one who was placed in front. And then I was pulled to the side by my elder cousin brother, and he told me that he wanted to give me something, and he gave me a wallet that once belonged to his father. When I accepted that wallet, I opened that wallet and I saw that there was an old 5-cent coin. We used to call them Zuda. And I said, this 5-cent coin, what am I going to use it for? For it is now worthless. It does not buy anything, oh dear brother. He then said, don't you know that when a man has told his relatives that this is what he wants to be done, we have to do it. We are following our African tradition. You know that if you do not want this thing, there is something that you need to do. If you do not want this wallet and the coin, the 5-cent coin that is inside of it, you cannot simply throw it away, but there are processes and procedures that are needed to be followed. Otherwise, a bad omen is going to follow you. You cannot deny what was left behind for you by a man that died. To you, he is like a father. Therefore, you cannot deny this inheritance that he left for you. So I spoke for a very long time with my elder brother as well with my aunties, and all of these things, they were done in secret without the knowledge of my wife. I was afraid to get my wife involved because I knew that she had never liked the way that I was seeking this spiritual enlightenment. So I kept on hiding in the dark because I wanted to reconnect with the past, with my own ancestors. So whilst we were having these negotiations, that was when I told my brothers that I wanted this thing to be thrown away. Then they said, it is fine. If you want to throw away this wallet, including that 5-cent coin, we are going to accompany you, but we need to do this in secret. We are going to my father's grave. When we have gone to my father's grave, you are going to place the wallet that he left for you, as well as that 5-cent coin. Then you'll be on your way and no bad omen is going to follow you. And I said, but this is the first time ever hearing this thing, because as far as I had been researching our Shona culture, what I had heard from the research that I had made was that if someone dies and if they would have left maybe a jacket or anything or any of their personal belongings, you are not allowed, yes, to deny that item that they would have left for you, but there is an option if you do not want the item that you would have been given as part of your inheritance. What you do is that you go to where there is a river that is always flowing. Then you leave those items there. You bury them close to that river. This is what I told my auntie as well as my cousin brothers. And then they said, no, that is not the case indeed. Then they said, no. Then they said, yes, then they said, yes, according to our traditions, that is what we do. But in our family, this is not what we do. If you do not want this wallet and the 5-cent coin, let us go to my father's grave so that you can go and dump them there. Since I had been in Europe for a very long time, I thought that maybe I was the one who was wrong. So we then went to my cousin brother's grave, and when we arrived there, Brother Nashi, what surprised me is that they kept on pushing me to the front, and I wanted to tell them that I am pulling out. I do not want to do this anymore, but I was embarrassed because as for my auntie who was there, she is quite an old woman, and I have great respect for her, for the things that she did for me. For me to be in Europe, it is because of my auntie. She took me to school and she directed me in the right direction, which made me to end up living this comfortable life that I am living, me and my kids. If it was not for my auntie, I would still be suffering back home in Zim. So I respected her and I didn't want to make her feel uncomfortable. So for her sake, I said, let me just do this process so that we can finish up this ceremony before my wife finds out that this is what I am doing. So my elder brother then handed me the wallet. They told me that I had to lay that wallet that his father had left before. Then they told me that I had to lay down this wallet on top of my cousin brother's father's grave, and that is what I did. And after that, my cousin brother, he then asked me if I had any money at all, and I said, yes, I have money. And I said that I have some pounds and I only have $20. Then he said, it is fine, we can use that $20, not the pounds. And what surprised me, Brother Nash, is that I was standing on the other side of the grave. As for my auntie, my brother, and one of my uncle's wife who was there with us, they were all standing on the other side. So it was like me against them. And this made me to be very suspicious, but I was still ashamed to humiliate my relatives. So whilst they were standing on the other side of the grave and I was standing on the other side of the grave, my elder brother then made me to place that $20 on top of his father's grave. It made me to feel very terrible, but I did it anyway. After we had performed these rituals, then I was told that we were going to walk away from these graves, because at those graves, that is where my grandmother, my grandfather, including my own father and his siblings, are all buried. So we started walking away from the grave, returning back to my grandfather's compound, but we were walking in a straight line, and they made me to walk at the back, and then they told me to look back at the graves, and they all didn't look back. They kept on looking at my grandfather's compound. But when I looked back at the graves, I saw that on top of my uncle's grave there was a man, an old man, that was sitting on top of the grave. We then returned back to my grandfather's compound, and more ceremonies, more traditional ceremonies were done. Just when we were about to leave, that was when I was given this small clay pot We were told that this clay pot, it was going to serve as a reminder, since we were traveling back to Europe and we needed to reconnect with our African tradition. My wife was really happy because she said that she wanted to use this clay pot as sort of like a decoration in her kitchen. When we returned back to the UK, Brother Nashi, mysterious things kept on happening. As for that clay pot, it kept on disappearing. My wife had found a position in the kitchen where she wanted it to be. But whenever we would return back to our bedroom, we will then find out that this clay pot, mysteriously, it would have been transported from the kitchen back into the bedroom. So she kept on thinking that I was the one who was doing all of these things. Maybe I didn't want her to use this clay pot that I had been given by my own relatives. Then I started to have a lot of dreams, Brother Nashi, until I became a ritualist. In my dreams, I was then told that I needed to sacrifice, at least I needed to sacrifice a chicken, and I was supposed to pour the blood of that chicken in that clay pot. One day when I was coming back from work, I then bought a live chicken, and I had the intentions of slaughtering that chicken and pouring the blood of that chicken into that small clay pot. But along the way, after I had bought this chicken, my wife then told me that she wanted to use my personal car. She didn't want to use her own car when she was going out with the kids. Brother Nashi, I then parked the car by the side of the road, and then I went outside and I took that live chicken and I just murdered that chicken, Brother Nashi. I twisted the neck of that chicken until it had died, because I was scared that my wife was going to find that there was a live chicken in my car. And then I just looked for this other refuse bin, and I went and I threw this chicken into that refuse bin. Later on, when my wife had gone out with the kids, I also went and I bought another live chicken. That was when I returned back home and I slaughtered that chicken standing in my bedroom. Brother Nashi, this is my own confession. Dear listeners, right there was a narration of that message that was sent to me by our dear brother. Strange things do happen in this world. Have you ever been made to do something by your relatives when you are at a family gathering? Something that made you to be very suspicious. Let's say that you are having a traditional ceremony done, then you are made to do some things that are quite suspicious. If anything has ever happened, if something like that has ever happened to you, please, you can tell us in the comment section.